In 1978, he ran for governor in California, and he got 5%. Correct? 5% of the vote. In 1978, which is unheralded today. I mean, that is an amazing figure. And someone said, "Hey, that's a pretty good showing. We should get Ed to run for president." So, 2 years later, Ed's running for president of the United States in 1980, and has so far been our highest vote getter as a libertarian of all time. And he's here with us tonight. So, we've brought Ed out of retirement, so to speak. And I think you've been waiting a long time to speak with all of us. So why don't I go ahead and turn it over to you, and you can go ahead and give us a few words. Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. I did well in 1978 and 1980 because I campaigned for a long time. First, I campaigned for the nomination of both those offices, so like for 5 or 6 months before the election. And actually for California, I was campaigning at the party convention, which I think was then in February. And so I campaigned for the nomination from February through the party nomination convention for the National Party in the end of July, and then campaigned from then on to November. And the reason I did so well is twofold. One is I went all around the state when I was campaigning for state office, and in smaller cities like Fresno and Visalia, if you're running for a state office and if you're a libertarian, you're still going to get local media coverage. You can't get a lot of local media coverage in Los Angeles or maybe San Diego, but you can get a lot of coverage in smaller media centers. So one of the things that I'm sure Chris is very attuned to is that the more places you appear, the more people are going to see you and the more people are going to like you. And the other thing that was very helpful in both of those campaigns was to start thinking about an organization very, very early. So if you're going to run in November, you want to start thinking about it the preceding November. And you want to get your friends and families and wives and partners or whatever you can get to dragoon into your effort, organized to help you as soon as possible. Because if you're a candidate, you can't make the appointments, you can't do all of the things yourself, you need people to help you. So getting organized early and getting a campaign team of like 2 people together makes you 3 times as effective as doing it yourself. So that's a very key thing. And the other thing that helped me in 1978 was it was a great year for libertarians. This was the year of Prop 13. And lots of people here can remember Prop 13, which was a real basic tax revolt. Property taxes were going up at an accelerated rate. There was no Prop 13, but needless to say before that. So any time that the legislature needed money, you just increased the tax rate. And I had somebody working for me whose property taxes trebled in 2 years. And he had 4 kids, and one kid was about to start college, and he was going to lose his house. And so he was out every single weekend passing out literature and doing what he could. And so it was a great year for libertarians. There was also an issue on the ballot then that was going to ban gay teachers from public schools. And it was called Proposition 8. And my wife and I put up some of our own money, and we got an ad that we ran on some of the smaller TV stations opposing that. So there was a very clear civil rights libertarian issue that was on the ballot. And that pressed the tax issue, made it a very good year. So part of doing well is being well organized, and part of doing well is having a good year to run. And if you're a Republican and you're running in 1964, or if you're a Republican and you're running after the Bush regime, there's no hope for you. But a good year and a good campaign are very helpful. And one of the things that I always try to do is to say the same thing every time I spoke. Now it sounds sort of boring, right? But if you're a third-party candidate, then people are not going to hear more than 2 or 3 times. And so they're not going to get it the first time. So you have to say the same thing every time. And then after they've heard it 2 or 3 times, then it's going to tie together and make more sense. And if you try to say something new and original every time, it'll be new and original, but people are not going to remember it the first time you spoke. So another clue for candidates and another clue for the party, I think, in my opinion, is always to say on a particular set of issues in a particular election, try to say the same thing so that people have heard it a couple of times and they'll understand it. You're not going to convince everybody, but you're going to convince more people that way. And that sort of brings me up to where we are today. And I think this is just my own opinion and my own program, but I think the Libertarian Party needs sort of a concrete program that every time we get a chance to say, what's your program? We say, well, our program is A, B, and C. And I'm sort of going to write an article, and maybe Bo will edit it, and maybe the publishers of California Libertarian paper will even publish it. And but I think we ought to have a sort of specific program that people can relate to. And I think the first step in the program is to say no to the whole Obama program. That the first thing to say is that the problem with the American economy is too much debt, that people are too indebted, that businesses are too indebted, that the government is too indebted, that everybody is trying to live beyond the income, and this has to stop. And the Obama program, which is designed to pump up credit in the economy and thereby create more credit and keep the economy running by getting people to borrow more money when they can't afford the debt they have, is exactly the wrong program. And creating this additional debt requires all sorts of things by the federal government. It requires them to buy billions of dollars worth of securities from the banks to pump up the bank credit. It requires them to raise taxes. It requires them in another Federal Reserve System to print a lot of money and create inflation in the future. So I think that the economic program starts off saying the Obama economic program to try to inflate the economy by raising taxes and using that tax money to spend for public purposes and to create new money in the economy through the Federal Reserve System is the wrong program. It may have some minor temporary benefits, but the temporary benefits are small and the long-term benefits are nil. The long-term results are very bad. So I think that ought to be the cornerstone of our economic program. And then Obama's always saying to the Republicans, who now are acting a little bit like the old green eye shade Republicans and not spending as much money as they did under the Bush administration when they had the presidency. But the program is you let the bad banks go bankrupt. You let Citibank go bankrupt, maybe Bank of America go bankrupt. You let the bad banks go bankrupt. And you wipe out the stockholders. The stockholders supported their executives and their board when they're doing the wrong things. You wipe them out. You reduce the value of the bondholders, and you put the bondholders in charge of the banks to reorganize the banks. And so you get rid of the people who made all the mistakes, and you start over again with a new team, and you get rid of all the debt the banks can't afford, and you get rid of all the stockholders who did the wrong thing.